the Bible's been manipulated over the years because it's thousands of years old. I don't know how to refute that personally.
Put this in perspective for us, 25,000 copies of this. Is there anything else historically that comes close to that amount? Are there other things that have that many copies?
No.
But what evidence do we have? Like, what have we found? Are there contradictions?
I've seen lots of TikToks claiming that there are.
Between 1100 AD and 150 BC, over 1,000 years' time, nothing had changed.
I've never heard any of this before. Fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff.
Well, we're in episode 2 of our Bible mini-series called The Evidence, and we're going over big topics, big questions about faith. And just in the last episode, we were talking about, does science disprove the creation story?
No.
Also that, but we landed on that the Bible really needs to be reliable for it to be helpful in that conversation about faith. So can we trust the Bible? Is it true? What kind of evidence do we have? That's really what we're diving into. And so we're going to get into a lot of different topics around the Bible and whether or not you can ultimately trust it.
Yep.
And so, Adam, I'm curious, just kind of as we kick this off, what are some of the common doubts people have about the Bible?
Well, maybe it's just my TikTok algorithm, but I get a lot of these videos of people like digging into conspiracy theories or doubts about the Bible and things like that. And also, I'm a pastor at a church, so it comes up a lot. There's a couple of places we could begin. I think one of the most common things that I'll hear is that the Bible's been manipulated over the years because it's thousands of years old. That's a lot of time for humans to step in, change things, work things for their own power.
That's what they do. Yeah,
and you hear about like councils and like, well, they kind of pick the books that they like, they change the words. And so I hear that consistently. I love to, in this moment, kind of come up with like, how do you answer that? And is that true?
Yeah. It's like Biblegate.
Yeah, exactly.
Richard Nixon changed everything forever.
And like Da Vinci Code's like woven into that.
Yeah,
and like, even if you haven't seen the Da Vinci Code, you maybe have heard something like that from TikTok or Instagram.
Oh, and people are into that too. It's like an industry. It's not just an industry, but it's also like social currency. Like, dude, I know the real story on the Bible. You guys are just sheeple. It's like, come on. Yeah.
So what are some of those? You said that people feel like they know the real story. Like, are you saying that people are?
I got a ton of these.
Okay.
I mean, there's like dozens of great. I mean, this is date night type stuff.
Is this your TikTok algorithm?
Who's date night?
Sit down with my wife, like, look at these idiots.
So what are some of your favorites?
I'm
like,
actually married to the opposite of me, which is a very good thing.
You would never allow that on a date night with
Well, I would implode as a person if I was allowed to enjoy that. But yeah, I would say there's like, if you narrow it down, 4 or 5 that are pretty prevalent. And let's talk about this because I'm sure you've seen these, right?
I have seen a lot of these, yes.
Give me your favorite one so far.
So I've been seeing a lot recently. Well, I mentioned the councils, but that they like sort of was like, put on the pointy hats and they all got together and they excluded books like Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, other one. I'm trying to think of some other one, but there's
Judas,
John.
Judas. So there's Gospel of Enoch, Gospel of Adam,
right? And they're like, these are equally as valuable as the 4 that got in, but they didn't get included because it excluded someone from power. Right. So I hear that a lot.
Right.
I'd love to hear.
My favorite. I was talking with somebody not too long ago who was like, "Okay, I'm really kind of nervous about this because he was listening to this podcast, and the guy was like, okay, so." This is really what happened. And you got to love that when that starts off. Like, this is really what, okay, so right?
They hold
like,
the keys. Yeah.
Man, you can't read Hebrew or Greek, but like, how is this? I watch YouTube, man. So basically, we got to be careful we don't because there's probably a lot of YouTubers watching this that are like, am I not supposed to watch YouTube?
I mean, they're probably watching this on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's true. We are the YouTubers right now. But.
That is true. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with being interested in these issues. But I think what we're trying to talk about is when you become a gatekeeper, when you become like, no, I know the truth. You got to come to me. I know really what's going on. And so anyhow, this guy was listening to this podcast and he was basically saying the actual truth was that Jesus was a really good teacher. He was kind of like this, a good Jewish person that observed Jewish rituals and whatever, and rules and regulations and kind of talked different ways of observing them and maybe pushed the line on some things. And he died. And afterwards, this guy named Paul came by, who was another Jew, who said like, oh, I like what he's saying, but it's just not broad enough. It's we're going to now take this and we're going to make it universal. And so what's the best way to make it universal? That he rises from the dead, that it's going to be something that appeals to everybody. Like, I can live forever. And so he went into length of how this YouTuber was coming up with this conspiracy theory of how after Jesus' death, the message was taken and it was completely universalized, that like everybody would love it. So this is my first one. Okay, so I'm saying maybe like 4 or 5 of these. I don't know how much time I'll have, but the first one is that somehow Jesus' message was taken and changed to broader. Have you heard this before? Like, has a broader appeal. And we can go back and forth on this one because I know the Romans would have laughed. They would have been like, wait, so you're saying he died on a cross? Are you serious? I mean, it was Cicero that said in like 63 AD, he was like, no Roman should even mention the word crucifixion. It was below them, So your main character in this story that you're creating dies on a cross. The Greeks would have thought it was ridiculous because the idea of a God becoming a man was like intellectually ridiculous. It was stupid, that they always held. They kind of had this division of the universe. So everything spiritual is up here. Everything body-like or sarkos was like down here. And that's why when you blow out a candle and, the smoke goes up to heaven because everything spiritual goes up and everything solid stays down and it's like trapped. So we want release one day. And so the idea of a spirit becoming a body to them was like, no, it's like going the wrong way on a one-way street. You just don't do that. And of course, the Jews thought it was blasphemy. They were like, so there's more than one God? Like, what are we talking about? So let's imagine this for a second. Paul, let's give this idea some credence here. Paul hears about this Jesus, likes what he's saying, says, well, let's universalize it. Let's make this story where they die on a cross, they're in a cave for 3 days, and then they rise to life. So everybody will love that. No.
That's the wrong material.
Right. Yeah. And who's going to see them first?
Yep.
Women.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't know if you know much about this, but like women back then they weren't even allowed to give testimony in court.
Right.
They were seen as, because they had ovaries, and actually the word hysterion, hysteria, or when you say someone's hysterical, that means ovaries. That means like you are completely unstable. You can't be relied on for witness. And so that's written into the story.
Yeah.
Well, was it Mary and Martha, right?
So, and some other women.
Yeah. So why would you write that into the story? That's a horrible story.
What you're saying is if they wanted mass appeal, if the play was let's like change Jesus's story to like get it out so we can gain power and prestige, that would not be the way to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, build on that. Let's think about this. Histemi is the Greek word for resurrection. Okay.
Didn't know that, but good to know.
So come on, everybody knows that, right? So it's this word that's used, that's never used in the ancient world. And we're going to say this a few times, but it's never used in the ancient world. And all of a sudden it just blows up in the early part of the, actually 50s AD, like right after Jesus rose from the dead. This word would have meant nothing to anyone because it's physical resurrection, like coming back to life physically. That would be the worst central plot to use. Like, oh, no, he rose to life. He came back to life again. People would have been like, what are you talking about? In fact, it's a couple of times in the Gospels where Jesus says, the Son of Man will go in, he's going to be flogged, he's going to be beaten, he's going to be insulted, and he will rise from the dead on the third day. And it says they were confused, but no one dared ask them. And so it was like 2 or 3 times in the Gospels where it shows they had no clue what this idea was. So again, why would you choose that as your central story and make it like a mass appeal when nobody's asking that question?
And it also feels to me, John, like just the teachings of Jesus that you see that's in the Bible that we have today, that doesn't seem like a great place to begin if you want to gain power.
Right.
Like what Jesus teaches about being a servant to all. The early church was known for like taking care of orphans and starting hospitals.
Right.
That's not like a system that's going to gain you like great wealth and great power.
Right. Well, that's a really good point because I mean, when you think of it, they weren't, we think of today, like these pastors are wearing like $800 shoes and getting book deals and all
Preachers
that.
with sneakers.
Nonsense. Yeah. What is that again?
I think it's like a Instagram or something where people post pictures of preacher sneakers.
Oh my god!
And they look them up. They try to look up how much they cost. And like,
I follow it, and I haven't seen you on there yet, John.
No,
so
no. I'm just gonna say I purposely buy like those Amazon like $12 shoes or whatever.
Amazon basic shoes.
Yeah. Seriously, I purposely
don't
do
hate
that.
on Amazon, man. They work.
I do. Someone actually said to me one time, they're like, "Well, we know you guys wear makeup when you preach on stage. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, we don't. He's like, yeah, I can see. I'm like, no, we don't. And then he had this big conspiracy theory about what we were doing. But
my biggest dad thing right now, I have to admit, is sneakers that I can just slip on without having to tie the shoelaces.
No tying.
And my wife is calling me a dad now because that's what I'm excited about. It's not what they look like. It's that I can jump into them with one movement and I'm ready to roll.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So
call you dad, just call you smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But what you're saying is the version of Christianity that's like this prosperity gospel thing where you make money off of Christianity. That's not what Jesus teaches in the Bible.
Well, not only that, but like his early followers, they didn't have book deals.
Right.
Like, they weren't like, oh, okay, well, then I'm just going to change the story a little bit and I'll have this massive following. No, in fact, the story that if they chose to make a story up, first of all, it's a horrible story for the Romans, Greeks, and Jews. Okay. Women being primary witnesses of it, horrible story back then. I'm not saying in general, just back then. This idea of resurrection wouldn't have appealed to anybody because they weren't even looking for it. They didn't even have a category for it in their heads. It wasn't like they were secretly wishing that they all could be raised to life one day. This was a revolutionary teaching. It was different. And then on top of that, if you're to go out and talk about this thing, got you whacked. You know what I mean? Like there was no way that anybody was claiming any kind of influence. They were all poor. They were beat up and eventually died. I mean, some got their heads cut off. Some were crucified upside down. I mean, it was horrible.
And that's usually what I hear is that the apostles, those like 12 guys that ran with Jesus, maybe some others nearby, they were seeking power. And so they made up this story with Paul.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is they all died terrible deaths.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And in the stories about them, like Peter, he doesn't look too good. Like there's some stuff in there about them being like doubting and unbelieving. Yeah. If I were making the story up and rewriting
That's a good point.
I probably would have made myself look better.
Yeah. You want to be the hero of the story and not look bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at most religious stories, like if you read other religions and their religious stories, they're all given hero status.
Yeah.
They're all given this like, wow, and he was tall and he was handsome and he was amazing and he did this and he conquered that, and you don't see any of that.
Right.
Yeah.
This almost feels like when we think today, we make content that we want it to be mass appeal, for it to go viral. We're trying to go with a trend.
Yep,
People already like this thing.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about, TikTok algorithms. But that really is saying, what do people like? Let's do more of that. So they pass it around, so they share it. And it sounds like with this story, the disciples making this stuff up, they would not be hitting trends.
Right.
They'd be at the bottom of the algorithm.
Yeah.
And so it seems to say,
that's a good way of putting it.
Maybe they were just telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing it for popularity.
Yeah, you look at John chapter 1. What does he start off with? The word became flesh. The Greeks would have closed it immediately and been like, this is nonsense.
Why is that?
Because sarkos, flesh, and spirit, they're like inseparable. When Socrates talked about at one point being released from the prison house of the soul, that he was chained down in this body. And so enlightenment comes from the spirit, and everything body was unenlightened. I mean, in fact, later on, we can talk about this later, but like the Gnostics developed this even further in saying that God himself never created this world because he couldn't have any touch with it. He couldn't even have contact with it because sarkos, the flesh, is so tainted and so sinful, just like not enlightened at all. So the Greeks would have shut the book immediately. And then, he goes on to say that he had flesh and he walked among us. The Docetists, the early people that believed that Jesus was just a spirit, they would have closed it. I mean, John ticks off probably about 5 or 6 major people groups in the first chapter of John, like right off the start. So I would say, in summary, if I've got 4 things to say about YouTube conspiracies, the first conspiracy that somehow, they were universalizing Jesus' message and trying to make it a broad appeal, it's baloney. Yeah, 100%.
So what are some of the others?
Okay,
you said you got, so that's one.
Okay, yeah.
They wouldn't be trying to make mass appeal. Wouldn't make sense. What's
the second one is that so just to give a little bit of history. So, and help fill everyone in on this, like the whole history part of it. Jesus dies, he rises again. He tells his disciples, go. They kind of hang out. He's like, no, I mean go. And then like Pentecost happens. Then they go out and they don't write anything down because he said, go preach. Kerygma means to like go and talk. Caruso, like speak it out loud. Because not a lot of people read back then.
Right.
And so you talked about it because they were convinced that the end was coming. And that's why you don't see early manuscripts within 6 months after the whole thing. You see it about 20 years later when they start getting older. So about 20 years later, that's when you start seeing some of it written down and it starts circulating. It circulates to a wide audience. But during that time, the Christians, they all get persecuted, right? Because the Jews are mad. They're like, no, you're starting another religion. The Romans are like, we don't care what you think. Just stop being annoying. And so like they do go through series of seasons where like Vespasian, Decius, Nero, where they persecute Christians. And then there's some times where they kind of relax a little bit. So up to about the first 300 years of being a Christian is pretty hard. Then there's this guy comes along, his name's Constantine. And Constantine, he pronounces religious freedom for everybody, but he kind of takes a liking to Christianity and for various reasons. But he says to the Christians, he says, hey, let's get everybody together and have a council of people that would figure out like, so what do you guys all believe? You know, just make sure that everybody's sure on like kind of get everybody straightened out, you know, sorted out, whatever. This is YouTube conspiracy number 2.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is what I brought up earlier, that at this council, Constantine kind of orchestrated something that like, here's exactly what everyone needs to believe. Here's the Bible. And then this Bible was what we ended up with today. And it's not the OG stuff. It's not the original stuff that Jesus had talked about or the apostles. And I don't know how to refute that personally, John. So I would love to hear what you would say if someone was suggesting that that's how it worked.
Yeah, and it's funny. The big 3 on that is something like you said, Constantine's like, well, you know what? I'm gonna bring my agenda to this, and you guys got to all believe this.
Right.
And then the other thing is that they said, hey, we're only going to believe these books.
Right.
There's all these books out there. We're only going to believe these 5 or these 4 or whatever. You know, like this is what we're going to be doing. And I said 5 because like Luke and Acts. But you know, we're gonna only have this little bandwidth of things. And then like the third thing would be that we're gonna make Jesus divine.
Right.
Okay? And because he's divine, everybody's got to listen to us. Baloney, like total baloney. Nicaea was not about deciding what books to authorize or say these because they couldn't. I mean, think about it. When it took off, when people started writing, you know, when the original the 4 Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when they had their gospels out there, it was copied and copied and copied, and it was just sent. It was like viral. It went all the way over from like Carthage, Africa, Horn of Africa, all the way over to like the Indus Valley near India. I mean, it was just like spanned everywhere. It went up to like Spain, you know,
which is crazy because there was no printing press, right? So like they're not mass printing this book and getting like pamphlets out to people.
Right.
It's going by word of mouth, and then they're writing it down.
Totally.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, and 100% crazy. And this is what's really weird is we start getting these fragments, and they're written on papyrus, and papyrus degrades over time. So it's really hard to find these copies of copies of copies. But we have 25,000 copies of these things all over the place. Okay, you got about 5,800 that are in Greek. You got about 10,000 that are in Coptic and 10,000 that are in Latin. What's crazy is that these, when you compare them to each other, the only differences are really spelling, orthography, you know, like how letters change over time. And that's about it. I mean, there are some that show glosses or like people include stuff on the side. But when you compare it with like thousands of others, you see that they all agree.
And is this, so put this in perspective for us, 25,000 copies of this. Is there anything else historically that comes close to that amount? Are there other things that have that many copies?
No.
Is there like what would be the next thing on the list? If
Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, Hesiod's, not Hesiod, Thucydides. I mean, there's just like ancient historians, you know, where they have several hundred copies of stuff.
Wow. So under 1,000. Even
I think the
those.
Iliad is somewhere around like 800, maybe 1,100, something like that. I'd have to check on that. I know that there's one, and I don't know whether it's Herodotus, but I think it's like 4 copies, you know, and it's like nowhere even close to 25,000.
I've heard, and maybe I should just, I have an iPad, I should just look this up, but some Caesars, like some people who ruled the Roman Empire, that were basing their life off of like 10 manuscripts. And no one is questioning like, oh, is this legit?
But think about that though. 10 manuscripts that agree from different parts of the world, that's pretty reliable.
That's true.
Yeah, that's actually really good. If you had 10 manuscripts from all over, you know, that were like 10 of them that all agreed in essence, they're all coming from something that we can agree like, okay, well then I think we have the story. If they totally disagree with each other or whatever, that's fine. But now you go from 10 to 25,000. And so the reason why I'm bringing up this number is this. In that council, no one No one was saying, nope, we only want to have these books. First of all, the council wasn't about that. It was about the divinity of Jesus, whether or not he was divine. It had nothing to do with books, because they were all like, we know the books were written between 50 and 100 AD, and we've accepted them for a long time now. I mean, we have some of the earliest manuscripts go back to like 125 AD that show the Gospel of John exactly as we have it now. So nothing was changed, and they didn't have the power to do that, because it was like the cat's out of the bag, or what's the phrase there? It's just like, that sounds wrong.
I think that's it.
I think that's a mistreatment of animals, but yeah, there's just like a lot of activity, that's going on, of copying activity, and there was no way they could shape it.
So it sounds like what you're saying is it's not that they were picking and choosing. It's that they already saw what was being used by the church, and they kind of put a fence around it.
Yeah. Now that's ugly. You know what I mean? Because a lot of Christians are like, I don't like that. I wish God himself came down and said, these are the Gospels.
Golden tablet style.
Yeah.
Which honestly, John, that's kind of how I grew up believing the Bible came together. Was like, so the big title question for this podcast is like, how do you know the Bible's true?
Yeah.
I assumed God zapped some guys and they were just like writing it out, and then or it fell from heaven, and then it's like, well, there you go, it's settled. That's definitely from God.
Yeah.
But it wasn't quite that clean, which is what you're saying is maybe it's a little messy. But there's almost some like God wanted to use humans. Right? He had an intention.
God crowdsourced.
Right. He wanted us to be part of the like process.
Yeah.
And it's not that this council picked and chose, instead that they put a fence around it.
Yeah.
Do you, off your head, do you have like the criteria they were using? Like, how did they decide this one is good, this one's not good? I'll look it up.
Yeah, look it up, because the last thing on this council deal was that really the purpose of the Nicene Council, which is Constantine's council, that he convened, because I think the next one was like 367. I think the one after that was like 390. But this is Constantine's council. And to say that he somehow said, everybody's got to read these books, this is how we're going to agree on this, whatever. It didn't happen that way. There's no way it happened that way. So anyone who, if you're watching someone on YouTube where they're saying that, it's false, and they're just misinformed. The second thing, though, the second question that a lot of people bring up, they're like, well, they really forced Jesus' divinity. And again, it wasn't about forcing Jesus' divinity. In that council, they already knew that as far back as Philippians chapter 2, where Paul, and he's writing in 50 AD, he's already talking about the divinity of Jesus. It was more like, hey, guys, we know that there's some people among you, and there were some people there that were kind of like, well, maybe Jesus wasn't God. And it was more like, yeah, that let's not taint what we know to be true. It wasn't like, hey, we'll get more power if we say Jesus was divine, because then everybody has to listen to us. It was more like there were some people that were coming into the church that were saying, well, we love Jesus, we love God, we believe in all this stuff, but we just believe that Jesus wasn't from God, or we believe that Jesus wasn't God in his essence. And so they were trying to iron out that one thing and say, well, let's not taint what we know to be true.
And so these councils that were meeting,
Yep.
they weren't deciding what books of the Bible should be together. They were deciding what to believe about what they had been reading.
Yeah.
And trying to like organize,
That's a great way to think about it.
so we're reading, here's all these manuscripts and texts that we're getting. What do we believe about it? And what are the claims that are being made? And they're kind of setting up like a creed kind of thing. Like, here's what we believe.
Right.
And so was there a point, and maybe this is what you were looking up, Adam, was there a point in time then that a different group of people were saying, well, we actually need to figure out what this fence is, because we have a completed Bible.
Yeah.
And so at some point in this journey, like, yes, we have to decide what we believe about what it says, but we also have to put some limit, because there has to be a point where, we have 25,000 of this book, but we only have, I don't know, a few hundred of this one. So let's not do this one. And so is there some place that we could learn who put it together? How did they do that?
As I understand it, and John, you can help me fill this in. So separating Old Testament from New Testament, Old Testament, you've already got that. Septuagint, right? That's the translation into Greek. New Testament is kind of what we're talking about now. Yeah, at these councils, they had an affirmed list of canon books. It wasn't them deciding. Instead, they just said, here it is. This is the canon book. And I think, there's tons of church councils throughout the first 1,000 years after Jesus. And during those times, they keep affirming those same books over and over again. I did look up Bruce Metzger is my source.
There's a guy.
These are like the four things that they were kind of looking at. One, apostolic authenticity, meaning does it go back to an apostle, someone who actually was with Jesus? So this is the eyewitness thing. Also, orthodoxy, is it saying the same stuff the other books are saying? So there's not like crazy outliers. antiquity, meaning it shows up in the first century, written in the first century. And then the last one is usage by the early church fathers. So if it's hitting those 4 things, they were kind of thinking, okay, if it's doing these things, it's widespread use, then I think we're going to put it in.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy to say that somehow these councils were ways that were like dark, like pull the shades. We're going to like totally manipulate everything. It's just ridiculous. The third thing, we're ready for the third thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Third thing comes on the heels of that, and it's very, very close in terms of like what it's dealing with is these Gnostic gospels.
Right.
So there, and that's where, I mean, if you haven't, it's what the heck is it? It's Billy Carson?
Yeah,
Billy Carson.
Is it Billy Carson?
Yeah.
Billy Carson was trying to like, he was gaining a large following. I guess he got like millions of views on his stuff talking about how the Gnostic gospels were secretly, that's actually holds the secret knowledge of Jesus. And like he had a girlfriend and, maybe he's an alien and like all this kind of weird stuff. And then Wes Huff just comes and he's just like, just destroys all of his arguments.
He seemed right. It seemed like people who didn't know enough about it with Billy they kind of took him at his word. And then when someone
I just have a hard time with that phrase, seemed right.
Seemed right, meaning like if you don't know any different
Right.
or have any more
He's
information,
just throwing around all these
you look at
names.
Billy and you're like, I don't know. I haven't read them. So maybe it says that. And then you have someone like Wes who comes along and knows that stuff really well, is able to quickly and easily point out. So that was some of that tension is like, wow, like he was way off, but he still gained traction.
I mean, I've seen his stuff. It does, like, it's compelling.
Is it?
Yeah, like it makes you think, like, wait a minute, maybe I've been missing something. The way that it's delivered, it's pretty compelling.
Okay.
But what you're saying is, and Wes Huff was saying, is that
Yeah.
it's not legit. It's not founded in it. He's delivering with confidence, but there's not anything back. Can you explain a little bit, like, why not?
I would totally. Okay. So everybody listening to this, if you ever have felt tempted or thought like, well, maybe there is extra biblical stuff out there, these Gnostic gospels, maybe they have the truth, read them. Just read them at some point. They are weird. Okay. And I'm not just saying like, okay, well, because they're weird, they're invalid. But it's stuff like,
we want to hear the weird things.
Oh yeah.
Can you give us some highlight reel of the weird stuff?
So there's the secret book of John. It's called the Apocryphon of John. And again, a lot of these are pseudonymic. They're pseudonyms.
Using like a different name.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Pseudepigrapha. That's what they call them. So they're written by like Adam, the Gospel of Adam, Gospel of Enoch, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Thomas. In the Apocryphon of John, it's kind of like the secret knowledge of John, and it's like, how much do we need to get into? It's like everything I look at, it's almost like you look a little bit further and like maybe we need to talk about this, maybe we need to talk about this. But essentially, this whole idea of a Gnostic gospel, gnosis comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means to know, and it's like secret knowledge of something. And so, like, when you hear the word prognosticate, it's like Gnostic is in there, like to say something beforehand, to know beforehand. So gnosis then, or this Gnostic understanding is that Jesus said these things, but he didn't talk about all of it because you weren't ready for it yet. And so the Gnostic viewpoint is that there are levels of spirituality. And most people are on one, but man, you can get into 2. And if you can get into 3, you're almost like God, like yourself.
And are they saying to get to those levels?
Yeah,
you read these other.
Oh yeah, if you
books?
read this stuff, you will get more inside knowledge.
And that sort of has echoes of like what we see today with some spirituality that like you can transcend. Like you can get to a higher level and like unlock new learning.
Yes. Click here and enter your credit card information, and you can get
subscribe and save. Yep.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of the way it was in the ancient world, was like these cults sprang up, and it was the opposite. It's funny because the Gnostic cults were almost the inversion of what we see with the Christian communities. That everything we think in terms of our conspiracy theories about the Christian communities getting power is exactly the Gnostics that were doing that. And so they were selling this like the image of like, we know more than you do. And if you want to be like one of us, you got to be like one of us. You got to come and join us. And so they gained power through this. And then the way they did it in the Apocryphon of John, they talk about how you have to understand that God is so much like God and we are so like we are. There's no way the two could ever have touched. And so God didn't create the world. God, because he is unknowable, unsearchable, unseeable, you can't even say the word God. It's just like you have no concept of what that is. Because of that, because he's so life-giving and eternal, he has these things that emanate out from him. And one of the things that emanates out from him is called Sophia, which means wisdom. Sophia had a bunch of things that emanated out from her, and one of them was called Yaldabaoth. And Yaldabaoth was this kind of petulant, ignorant, arrogant son. Like picture a 7-year-old with a big lollipop in his hand, and like the little Tamagotchi
I already
thing
don't like
or
him.
whatever. Like what would be a good, like, he's Pokemon dude. He's just like, get out of my way, I'm trying to find my Pokemon.
Maybe Team Rocket on that
Okay,
one. Yeah, those
good.
guys are,
Yeah,
those
give me
guys are
some-
jerks. we don't like them.
By the way, I've never heard any of this before. This is fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff. So the whole idea is that if God is out there and unreachable and unknowable, so much God that we can't even know what he's like, he has these things that emanate out from him called demiurges. And so as these things progress out, that explains why we have the world, because God couldn't have touched it and created it because the world's messed up. We're sarcos, we're flesh. So these demiurges came out, and Yaldabaoth actually created the world, and he did it with his mother's magic. Okay. And he didn't really understand it all. And that's why everything's messed up. That's why things fall apart. That's why, there's all kinds of horrible things that go on. And then he had these archons that come out of him that are almost like demons and angels, and they inhabit the world. So point being, if you know that, then you can start ascending through these levels of understanding what the truth is.
So it seems like that's really distracting from what the Bible is really showing is clearly known.
Man, if you want to read the Gnostic Gospels, go for it. But, in like the Gospel of Thomas, if you're a woman, you're in bad shape, because according to the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said that you have to become a man in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. And it's like, well, that's a problem. What are we going to do with that? When you read through these different Gospels, the Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Enoch, Gospel of Adam, you have all these very different and controversial teachings that, first of all, don't sound anything like Jesus. They're not written by an eyewitness. They're from the 2nd to 4th centuries. They're after they've already established, like the first 50 to 100 after Jesus, from 50 AD to 100 AD. These things were all written. We're all kind of settled on those things. And then these other things just pop up. So anybody trying to tell you in a YouTube video that the Gnostic Gospels are the real truth and that this council or that council was trying to weed them out, well, of course they were trying to weed them out.
Right. What I'm hearing is they didn't meet that criteria.
Right.
There's a reason they didn't get included, and it's because they were not legit.
Yeah.
They weren't even close enough to Jesus, and then also they were saying things that were inconsistent. Because it sounds like there's tons of copies of these other books that are saying one thing about who Jesus was, what he taught, and though they're from almost these different angles, they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, what people could notice as a red flag is this is suddenly inconsistent.
Yeah.
That's probably a flag.
They also weren't written by the people that they're claiming to be written by, right?
Yeah.
Like Gospel of Barnabas,
Right.
not written by Barnabas.
Was that clear?
Dude, Gospel of Barnabas, talk about it.
I don't know anything about it.
Oh my gosh.
I just know it was
So
written by Barnabas.
The Gospel of Barnabas isn't even in the original. So what? The Gospel of Barnabas is a super big fake. Okay, they've taken a piece of papyrus that you can actually date from ancient Near East, but then they wrote over it. I think it was like in Italian or Spanish or something like that.
Oh, this is like a very late.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've even quoted from Dante's Inferno.
Oh, it's a very, very late.
When was Dante's Inferno written? I'm
I'll
sure
look
it
it
was
up.
like
It's gotta
the
be
13th century or something like that.
1500.
Yeah. So people are reading this stuff and they're like, wow, maybe I thought all this stuff wrong all along. And it's you are being taken for a ride, like big time. So it's just funny that as I think back in the 80s and 90s, as people thought, man, when we have the World Wide Web, when we have the internet, we're finally going to have a clearinghouse of real information. And what it's done is it's proliferated all these wacko theories.
Yeah, 14th century for Dante's Inferno.
So I mean, think about that. You're quoting from something that, I mean, the person that writing this wasn't even too with it to even figure that out.
Yeah.
Right. And all it takes is a little digging into some of that timeline and some of that information.
Now, the thing is, I think, again, when we talk about conspiracy, and we're going to move on to other things, but I think, say my last thing about these YouTube conspiracy theories, a lot of them are fueled from people that are very, very intelligent. So like Bill Maher, I think Bill Maher, I don't agree with everything Bill Maher says, and I don't like his crassness or his language, but I do appreciate how when he believes something or he thinks something or he's done research on something, he'll say it in a very straightforward way. He'll just kind of like say it as it is. And he does it in a way that's very convincing. And so I agree with a lot of the things he says, except when he comes to the whole Jesus idea. He made a movie called Religulous. He's got a show, right? What is it?
I think it's called Bill Maher.
It's just called Bill Maher. Okay. So I've heard him over and over again kind of quote how Jesus and the whole story of Jesus was actually lifted from previous traditions. You know, the like Isis, Horus, and Seb, you know, that they had Horus was born on the 25th of December from a virgin birth, that they called him Mithras. He's another virgin birth, that there's probably about 12 different examples of how Jesus and the whole Jesus story was borrowed from all these other things. And again, that's just not true. All of those stories actually post-date Christianity, and actually Christianity influenced the way they are. So everybody knows Isis, Horus, and Seb, right?
Do we?
Yeah.
Do we know?
You want to hear it?
Yes,
Those
please.
sound like my neighbor's dogs. Like, I'm pretty sure they named their dogs.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Sound like some of the other Pokemon that I don't know about.
Yeah.
Please keep going.
Exactly. So it's Egyptian. You got Isis and Osiris, right? And they're a couple, and they're enjoying life together. They got the house, the kids, all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. So Osiris has this brother who's not too happy with him. His name is Set. And Set, I don't know, he's supposed to be gods. Like, are they dumb? You know? So Set's like, yeah, I made this coffin, and I made it out of lead. You should try it out. So he gets in it, seals it shut, throws it in the water. Guy dies, you know, so Set kills his brother. Isis
I mean,
isn't
if
happy
you're
with
that gullible, maybe
Yeah, I
you
got this
deserve to
coffin.
go into the coffin. I don't know.
But you are a god,
Yeah.
okay? So he dies, and long story short, he gets dismembered. They take parts of him and like cast them all throughout the universe. I think it's 12 or 14 parts or whatever. And so Isis is really sad, you know, really upset. And she just weeps and goes throughout the whole universe and collects different parts of his body. And she puts them all together, but it's missing one part. Okay, and this is where the PG rating comes in. If you have any kids in the room, small animals, you might want to leave the room. So there's a critical part that's essential for having grandchildren someday that is missing.
Yep.
So
from his body.
from his body.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
So
No, somewhere else.
we need to move on.
Yeah.
The point here, though, is that she then invokes some sort of magic. I can't remember who she asks. She asks somebody to help complete the body so that she can have a baby. Okay. Now, he is still dead, but his death now becomes part of the reason why we go through winter. And then he rises in the spring, you know, so it kind of is an etiological myth for why we have spring and summer, or spring and fall, or winter. Summer, winter, spring, and fall. We have seasons. Okay. So anyhow, that is what Bill Maher points to in saying Jesus borrowed from Osiris and Isis in the virgin birth.
Virgin birth is the connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that
I don't
does that
follow
make
it.
any
Wait,
sense?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. When you hear, well, you know, Jesus, he borrowed from this and this and this and this and this, and he goes through rapid fire, so you don't have time to check anything out. If you actually checked it out, there's no connection there. And then on top of that, he'll say, well, December 25th, and apparently, you know, the Isis and Osiris thing is linked to December 25th. The Bible never says December 25th.
Right.
It's just something that the church added on later just to kind of dovetail with Saturnalia, and that's fine. But these loose connections that are built, like he'll say that Mithras is a Roman cult. Mithras, Kybele, all these different cults, like pagan cults. It talks about how Mithras, he'll say that, oh, Mithras was born of a virgin. No, Mithras was born out of a rock. So it's like there's no connection here. No, someone didn't sit down and go, let me pull all my pagan resources together and sculpt Jesus. Like we've seen how that didn't happen to begin with. But when you actually look at the connections, there are none. Or they post-date.
John, just a little quick dovetail. I've heard you mentioned Christmas, like lining up with a pagan holiday. I've heard the same thing about Easter before. As I understand it, that was on purpose. They were like claiming that date. Early Christians were claiming that date for Christianity.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily like, oh, we know it happened on this date, but instead we want to claim it.
Right.
But I've heard that as a reason why Christianity could be false is that they've just stolen these holidays from other religions.
Right.
But
Right.
that actually makes no sense.
No, not at
They
all.
were fully aware of what they were doing when they did that.
And so, listen, I think if anybody listened to this, there's a lot of information out there, right? And this is how I would compact it all into something that's totally memorable. Now, you guys Star Wars fans?
Yes.
I am.
Absolutely.
So tell me, favorite Star Wars?
Oh, man.
Movie?
Yeah.
Rogue One.
Nice.
That's my favorite. It's one of the
Ooh.
spin-off ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The way I used to describe my favorite one was Luke in the black suit. because growing up when I was little, I used to love that.
Is that Empire Strikes
That's
Back?
one. Yes.
Yeah.
That was like like I thought that was so cool. I
Yeah.
used to dress up in all black and
I
like
can
run
see
around
you
my
as-
yard.
You
Dude,
could
it
pass
was
as Luke.
it was amazing. But yes,
You could be
something,
Ewan McGregor. That's what you could be.
maybe that one.
Yeah.
Not back then though.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of the beard going for me, so I was
Nice.
Luke. But anything in that original trilogy was my favorite.
Yeah. And I would say like Empire Strikes Back is probably really cool, especially when like, isn't that the one where Darth Vader's like, doesn't he come up and save Luke from being zapped by
That's the next
Palpatine?
one. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
is it the next
Return of
one?
the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi.
Oh wait, no, that's the one. That's the one where he wears the all black. It was
Yeah,
Return of the Jedi.
He comes
He
back
gets-
and he's
yes,
like this.
That's
yeah,
it. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everybody knows that 4, 5, and 6, right? 4, 5, and 6.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's just Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi.
A New Hope.
yeah.
Empire Strikes, yeah, and then
So everybody knows those three
Mm.
are like up here, and then whatever Disney did with Star Wars is ridiculous, right? It became
Was that
this,
7, 8, 9? Yeah, those ones.
No, not even that. I'm talking about like all these new series and
spin-offs.
stuff like
Oh,
that.
the
Mandalorian?
shows and
Oh,
things.
yeah. They started off okay, but then they
Yeah.
turned into this like
we don't talk about the Acolyte.
I know
Not good.
we can't get it because then it gets all political.
That's
Right? We don't want to get all political.
Which is the problem.
It's the equivalent of She-Hulk twerking. Okay, like come on.
Oh man, was that on your TikTok algorithm? That's what I want to know.
Is that on
It is
your
so
TikTok algorithm?
ridiculous. So ridiculous. So anyhow, the point being, we know there's a difference between 4, 5, and 6 and Mandalorian episode or season 3. Is there a season 3?
No.
Do you know why you don't know? Because nobody
Nobody
watches
watches
it. We know there's a difference between those two. And so these people that were gathering later on at the Council of Chalcedon and like the rest of them, they knew the difference between the 4 and the Gnostics. And that's all you need to know. Is like it's so easy to see, like, oh my gosh, the script writing, like the political agenda, the this, the that is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to watch it anymore because it feels like someone's preaching at you rather than telling a good story. And so these stories were actually, this happened. And it was a lot of times it was written in a way that would have worked against the people that were reporting it. And then you have these later ones, these Gnostic stuff that's just like, okay, this is weird. Jesus had a girlfriend. What are we pushing here?
Right.
Yeah.
So it was obvious. It
Yeah.
was just painfully obvious in the same way you would watch the original trilogy versus another.
100%.
That like this is just clearly not the real stuff. Not the
Right.
original
And we're
thing.
removed from it by, 1,500, 2,000 years. And so we don't see those nuances. If we were to be able to go
Right.
back in time and look at this, we would have been like, oh, clearly.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to believe Yaldabaoth?
This wasn't a debate, is what
Yeah.
you're saying. Like
Yeah.
they weren't like, oh man, should we pick Gospel of
Yeah.
Thomas or should we pick Gospel
Yes.
of Mark?
Yes.
It wasn't
and
like
no
that.
one was standing up and be like, well, guys, let's give them a fair listen.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Hey, everybody needs to be heard here. It just wasn't the way it was.
Real quick, summarize your 4 then.
So
for
we
us.
did the first one was the early followers changed the story
Mhm.
for the sake of power, glory, whatever, and they were trying to sell this, universalize it to everybody. The second one was that the church changed the Bible for an agenda. It added certain parts of the Bible, or accepted certain ones as acceptable and the other ones as not. Saying like the Council of Nicaea was all about that, when it was really all about the divinity of Christ. The third one was about how the Gnostic Gospels were suppressed, and we talked about how nobody watches The Mandalorian. And then the Bible, the last one would have been about the pagan myths. Yeah, that there's copying a bunch of pagan myths, which really they were all post-dating Christianity or just no connection at all.
So these are just 4 almost like highlight reels of some of the myths that were
Mm-hmm.
really popular, and that what you're showing us just became painfully obvious that they weren't true.
Yeah.
And there will be more of them to come.
Yeah.
That will start to pop up and kind of be these spin-offs that seem intriguing. They draw
Yeah.
us in. It's like hidden knowledge. And what we're seeing is there's a red flag that goes up that has to go up in our head to say,
yeah.
why is this suddenly a new revelation of knowledge? And so
Well, it's more interesting. I mean, you think about it.
It is
It's like
interesting.
either I can follow Jesus and go about the work of life transformation, which is hard,
Yeah.
or I can spectate and sell admission to this spectacle of
good.
like, I wonder if it's this, and what do you think of this?
Wow.
And it becomes more of like almost like a convention. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's go to this convention and like I'll sample a little bit of this. And what do you think about that? When this is, I wonder if and so it's basically you're evaluating or sifting through material rather than transforming and changing.
it's like if you're into fitness and you
Yes.
you learn so much about fitness,
Yes.
all the right diets. Oh, but I
that's
just
so
learned a
true.
new one, a carnivore diet. No, now we got to do the vegetarian diet.
Yes.
You learn all these diets. You spend your whole life learning about it. You never lift a weight.
Yes.
And you're just like,
You
I
know
never
people like
actually
that.
put in the work.
I know people like that.
And it's hard. It's easy. Like, I'm guilty of this. I love going down rabbit trails of like how like here's the day in the life of my eating habits and
Right.
lifting.
Right,
But
right.
again, at some point you have to just we all know
Yeah.
at its core, it's just diet and exercise.
Yeah, yeah.
Just go do it. But
Yeah.
we really want to we get excited about the new thing
Yep.
and it distracts us and it pulls us away from the actual work we got
So
to
you're
do.
that guy at the gym, and it's like, hey, you're doing that wrong. No, I looked up this video. You're supposed to be doing
I'm
it
not
this
big
way
enough to
now.
do that.
I've heard someone say sometime that if you hear people consistently saying that the Bible has been changed, it might be because they're afraid of the Bible changing them.
Ooh.
Hmm.
And that really struck me because I've struggled with those doubts. And then I wonder sometimes, like, would it be easier for me if the Bible was changed? Then I wouldn't have to believe that it's true and follow it in my life.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
probably would be easier.
Wow.
Because
Mhm.
following Jesus is hard work. Like,
That's a good
like
point.
you had said.
That's a really good point.
So we're going over evidence of the Bible, but really, and we're going to hear this a lot. We believe the Bible can change you,
Mhm.
and getting into it and just living it out, learning from God is really what we're invited to do.
Mhm.
So continuing on some of kind of just the evidence stuff, talking more about it, how it came together. Are there some cool archaeological pieces or nuggets that we could learn about? Like what evidence? We heard about the myths, but what evidence do we have? Like what have we found?
Yeah, it's like we fired arrows at the opposition. Now
Yes.
what do we have?
Yeah, what do we actually have? What could we dive into?
You want to start off?
I'm not an archaeologist. I would love for you to start off, John.
We'll start off then. Yeah, we've got a lot of really good, solid evidence for a lot of the stuff that goes on, or a lot of stuff that's in the Bible. And what's fascinating is, I would say, if you look at the track record of people that fire ammunition at the Bible saying, yeah, well, what about this? And what about this? I mean, if you go back about 100 years or so, people were really lambasting the Bible about how it's a bunch of myth. And really, this was the predominant theme. The predominant theme was that everything in the Old Testament, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, all these ites, there's no archaeological evidence for them. And so these were things that were made up by a bunch of priests during the Babylonian exile.
Mm.
So I'll back up because people will be like, what the heck is Babylonian exile? Essentially, all that we see in the Bible, from creation, Tower of Babel, tell me if I'm missing anything, flood, Abraham's story, the line, Joseph, all the way through Daniel, whatever, all the way down. Maybe not Daniel, because that would have been later, but all the way through the prophets, stuff like that. All of that writing came when the Jews were taken by Babylon into exile. And so there was this oral history that was floating around out there, almost like we have like George Washington chopping down a cherry tree, or what's a good like American
Myth? I don't even know.
I mean, there's just stuff that floats around
Right.
that people tell, where like when George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, his mother was like, "Did you chop down a cherry tree?" He's like, "I cannot tell a lie." And we're like, "Wow, George Washington was really honest, and his teeth were horrible."
Honest
Like,
babe, yep.
yeah. So
So they're
honest
saying
babe,
that
that's great.
they were
So all
They're
these
not
things
real
are
is what
floating around.
the argument. Okay.
Yeah. And so when the Jews, for good or for better or for worse, there's a historical event in which the people of Israel were taken over by Babylon to the north. And they were wizards at taking people over. Because what they did when they moved into an area, they would take all the leaders and deport them up to Babylon and retrain them, to brainwash them, give them new names, teach them all about their religion, and demoralize them, like change them. And then everybody else, like the truck drivers, the plumbers, whatever, and not I'm the same, but like they
What's wrong with
weren't
being a
like
truck driver,
I know,
man?
I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm just saying they weren't like the senators,
Yeah,
they were the teachers and everybody that stayed behind. They were the ones they sent a bunch of really pretty women down, and they would marry in with them. And what happens when you marry in with pretty ladies that are from Babylon? The kids get raised in the Babylonian
Become
gods.
like Babylon.
Yeah. So they were masters at this, of completely changing things. And the Jews knew this. So the Jews that were sent up to Babylon and they were living in captivity, they made a pact with each other. And the theory goes like this, and historically this is true. The Jews got together and they said, we will not be changed. We know this historically because they created something called synagogas, which is synagogue. That's where synagogue started. And synagogas just means assembly. It means a starting point where we get together. We're going to recite our legends, our lores. We're going to talk about our God. We're going to sing our songs. We're going to make sure that we keep, and they called it building a fence around the Torah.
That was
And
like their
so-
anti-brainwashing.
Yeah,
method.
Yeah. And that's how they did it. So the prevailing theory was that all of this stuff was made up by the priests to give them a sense of national identity in the midst of crisis. Get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Meaning there had been nothing written. None of the Old Testament had been written prior to this time. This is the idea.
Right. Yeah. So that's where all of the stuff gets written down, and that's where we find, like, oh, okay, well then Genesis really wasn't written by Moses; it was written by some priest, or that it was assembled together in pieces. There was like a priestly version of it, and then there's a Yahwist version of it, and there's all these an Elohist version, and all these different things are pieced together,
which would mean it didn't really happen. Yeah, and there's no evidence to prove it happened. It was just made up.
Yeah. And so basically, we're looking at this years later, basing our lives off of it, and people are laughing at us like, dude, it's myth. Come on, it's myth making. It's how they survived. So the problem with that, though, is that this was a predominant theory, like in the 1920s, 1910s, whatever. Problem is, archaeologically, we started to find this stuff. We found Hittite, Jebusite, Perizzite. We found these people groups. And then we found evidence of Sennacherib, Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser V, like all these people that actually did stuff in history. Wow. We found what they call stelas. They're like stones that talk about David. We found stuff that actually points to this stuff actually happening. We found the Eblaite tablets. Eblaite tablets are from like 1800 BC. Now this is creepy. This is so great. I love this. We found in these tablets receipts, and basically they're just like a dump where people just throw all their old tablets or whatever. And one of these tablets had on there the price of a slave. When we read Joseph being sold into slavery, guess how much it is?
Did it match?
20 shekels.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's exactly what.
So we later affirmed what was said in the Bible.
Now, here's what even makes it crazier. Now, think of this: 1800 Ebla tablets say 20 shekels. Joseph says 20 shekels. There's no way in the Babylonian exile. We're talking like 6th century, right? There's no way they could have fact checked that. Now, the cost for a slave during that time was 30 to 50 shekels. So they would have put 30 to 50, maybe 40.
Right.
How did they know 20? So that to me shows me, okay, there's something beyond here. Now, on top of that, more recently, there's this guy, Scott Stripling. He actually found something recently, which is so cool. Because, again, the predominant theory among most intellectuals back in the day was that this was all made up during the exile. It's nothing to be excited about. He just found something. It was like a dump, again, where things were thrown. And there was this seal over top of like a jar that was like a curse. And then the curse of it was written in Hebrew, which apparently we weren't supposed to have Hebrew back at this time that it was written. And it quotes from the Old Testament, which predates the Babylonian exile. So it's kind of like, whoa, wait a second. We're going to have to push back all of our timelines. And we're going to have to revamp everything that we're thinking about. So I say archaeologically, there's a lot of really, really solid evidence. Every time somebody tries to blame the Bible and say like, no, it's wrong about something, it's been proven false. I do have one more.
Yeah, please. This is great.
Is this okay?
Yeah, this is awesome.
I don't want to like totally nerd out, but Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sodom and Gomorrah, and I don't want to talk too much. Does anybody want to summarize Sodom and Gomorrah?
The story of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah.
Well, God destroys the city. There was two cities there. They're acting evilly, and they get destroyed, like completely decimated by fire. So that it seems. And what I've heard, John, is that people believe that story was fake, made up, and there was no evidence that those cities existed. But you're saying there's historical, archaeological evidence that they did?
Yeah, and this is like from leading scholarly journals. Even Smithsonian did a thing on this. So they don't know exactly where it is, but they found this area that they believe, they call it Tel Hammam, and Tel just means like a mound. And so it's like a mound that they found that matches the place there would have been, where Sodom and Gomorrah would have been. And what did they find? They found evidence of extreme heat and pressure and sulfur.
In the story, God rained down fire.
Yeah. Tell the story.
Because that's part of it too. It was destroyed, but some of the specifics is that, Abraham was trying to save this city initially.
Yeah.
But God was asking him to find someone righteous.
Right.
And when he couldn't, God rained down his wrath, rained down fire
and brimstone,
from heaven, and
sulfur,
brimstone, and just leveled
heat, pressure right there.
Yeah.
So, dude, okay, think about this.
Crazy.
If there ever were a story that was more fairy tale, God raining down sulfur and fire from heaven, destroying a bunch of cities.
Yeah.
couple of things. In this area, you see destruction like no other. Okay. They they called them nanodiamonds. Like there's like dust, glass that is so pressurized. They don't see that kind of pressure short of a nuclear blast.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called trinitite. And so this area had been blasted by pressure, heat, and large swaths of sulfur that are deposited in this area.
It's crazy.
It's insane to think about that. So you know what the Smithsonian came up with? They reported on what the scholars had theorized, like what could possibly have happened in this place. And their theory is that a large meteor came down and didn't hit because there's no impact point. There's nowhere that a meteor would have made like a depression.
Craters,
Yeah,
nothing?
there's
Wow.
nothing there. So they believe that a meteor came out of the sky and like this is where it is, came right over top of it and burst apart before hitting the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. So okay,
That's more believable.
no. I'll say I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, you're saying that okay, there's no way that God rained down fire and sulfur from heaven, but a meteor came and exploded over top of this one area that the Bible says fire and sulfur rained down from heaven.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
So maybe that's exactly how it happened.
Maybe God just went meteor, like fire one. So yeah. I
And
mean,
that's actually a really good side note, John. I think some people, myself included, struggle with stories in the Old Testament because they seem so crazy and so unbelievable. But I feel like as time has gone on, we've seen archaeological evidence that something natural like a meteor could have fulfilled the purpose that God intended.
Yeah.
God rained down fire,
That's good.
but he could have used a natural process like a meteor
oh yeah.
to make that happen. That all of a sudden starts to change my perspective on tons of crazy things that happen in the Old
yeah.
Testament.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. God can work through nature
Oh yeah.
to make things happen. That
Well,
matters.
It's funny you bring that up because now I'm thinking the flood. I'm sorry, not the flood. The Red Sea.
Right. Parting of the Red Sea is another great example.
Have you heard about that?
I remember hearing you talk about this in one of your messages about how that could have happened naturally.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's happened several times. In that area, there's a fault line, but there's also a way that the wind lines up on computer. When the computer analyzed this particular crossing, first of all, it's not the Red Sea, it's Yam Suf, which means the Reed Sea. So it's probably in the Reed area of the Red Sea. It's not like this wide, huge Atlantic Ocean, but it's big enough that obviously you can drown in it. And it was at flood stage because that was the time of year during Passover was right around where the water came in, and if the wind is blowing right, and it's exactly what Exodus 15 says, is the wind blew all night.
Wow.
And then if the wind blows at such a rate for such a time, it actually pushes it back and you can walk across on dry land.
Wow.
And it's happened many times. And now, again, is that a naturalistic phenomenon? Maybe. But it's funny how at exactly the right moment, as the Jews are leaving Egypt, and they're being chased by, these enemies coming down the hill. Oh, hey, this is great.
Yeah. And the same way God could have sent a meteor, could he have used some kind of natural phenomenon to get them across?
Yeah.
That story is crazy because they're pinned. And Moses, sticks his staff in the water.
Yeah.
And then, I do picture like this massive, just super deep
You
ocean.
see the whale, right?
Yes.
I've seen the movie. I've seen the DreamWorks movie.
Yes. I picture an ocean and just literal walls of water. And so what you're saying is
And they're walking on like completely dry
Right.
land. They're like, doo 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 doo.
Right. And so what you're saying is realistically, it probably wouldn't have looked that crazy. It would have been a space that it's a little bit more feasible that would have happened.
Yeah, that's wild.
And the same thing happened, I don't know, I'm forgetting where it happens, but it happens with the Israelites in the Jordan River as well, right? It opens, and I believe I've heard that there's a natural possibility for that as well.
Yeah, if you look into Jericho, Jericho, they all went around the walls fell down. When we actually excavate that particular area, Kathleen Kenyon did some excavations, and some of her stuff didn't line up with what the Bible was saying, but then they went back in and looked at some of the pottery she was looking at, the time of year it happened. You find that the walls actually did fall inward. They fell. And they fell exactly inward as the Bible talks about it. It was in the spring of the year. They found sealed containers of winter wheat. So, all these details line up. And it's just funny. Like, if we were to not have any faith in the Bible, we should find excavations that say, oh, actually, no, it was never invaded.
Right.
Or, but we're finding stuff that actually agrees with what's going on. Was it Sennacherib? I hope I'm getting this right. It's either Tiglath-Pileser, Sennacherib, or Shalmaneser V. I think it's Sennacherib. When he's laying siege to Jerusalem, Hezekiah prays for more time. At that time, he's the leader of the army, Sennacherib, is summoned back home. As he's summoned back home, his sons kill him.
Yeah.
So it puts everything into disarray for the next 14 years. And so Hezekiah buys more time. But it's listed in the Bible as Hezekiah saying, hey, I need some help here, God, help me out. And miraculously, he's spared. So essentially what's going on at this point, you see that's written in a stone, it says, I had Hezekiah like a bird in a cage. And so again, witness outside of the Bible to an actual historical account.
Wow.
So we find it all over the Bible.
Yeah.
And John, that reminds me, you brought up Hezekiah. I remember visiting Jerusalem a couple of years ago and going through something called Hezekiah's Tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, am I thinking of Hezekiah's Tunnel, or I am thinking of Hezekiah's Tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We got to walk through it, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
In the Bible, in 2 Kings, it talks about, I just looked it up, it says Hezekiah made one tunnel and one pool by which he brought water into the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like in 2 Kings, this is way back.
Yeah.
There's evidence of something you can still go walk through today.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a creepy thing to walk through.
It is kind of creepy.
Because it gets dark at times and you're like up to your knees in water and it's getting higher and you're like, wait a second.
Wow.
Where are we going? I still hear people talking, so they're alive. Good.
So John, I'm hearing all this archaeological stuff and it's amazing, but I do hear often people kind of describe the Bible and the way that it's been transcribed over time as just a game of telephone.
Yeah.
Or like Whisper Down the Lane, where it changes each person that hears it and passes it on.
Which that's a fun game.
It is kind of fun, but it's scary to think that if we think the Bible is the word of God, like if a game of telephone is what happened, then it's not God's word anymore.
I know this is a total rabbit moment, but when you play telephone, are you the guy that is faithful and like saying it to the next person, or do you just love changing
I like to change it.
Yes, I like to change it.
Why is that?
It's because it's funny. You know, I just change one little word so it's close.
Yeah.
But it like gets passed
See,
on.
my wife is totally opposite. She's like, oh my gosh, that's not the way this game is played. Like, you're supposed to keep it. We're supposed to win. Like, come on.
What is winning in telephone? To some people, it's the accuracy. To others, it's what can I turn it into?
Right.
But the thing is, like, that, if that's the way that people thought about the Bible, then there's no way we can trust it.
Right.
Yeah.
At least I would assume. I'm asking, like, do we have manuscript evidence for the Old Testament like we do for the New Testament that that's not the case?
Well, there's a couple problems with the whisper down the lane theory, and nobody ever talks about this. I don't get this at all. People talk about this like, oh, well, it's like a snowball. It just kept added to it over time. There's a big difference between playing whisper down the lane and preach in front of your friends. Preach in front of the witnesses that saw it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? So whisper down the lane, everybody knows it's a game.
Yeah.
And even if you wanted to, like, okay, just make sure it's, it's going to suffer some changes here or whatever. That's a whole lot different than getting you in front of 50 people and saying, this happened yesterday. You're going to have people going, that didn't happen. No, it didn't. No, I was there, and you're going to actually refine whatever you would actually say by the presence of the people. So in the New Testament, for example, it talks about how they witnessed the people who saw what happened. If they were witnessing what they saw happen to all these people, at any point, they would have been like, that didn't happen.
Right.
I was there. Whatever. And they walk away.
Yep.
So why were they convinced?
That's 1 Corinthians 15, right? Paul talks about how there were 500 people who witnessed Jesus after he'd come back, after he'd already died.
Yeah.
And they were talking with him, and he said, go talk to them.
Yeah.
You can go ask them about this.
See, here's another problem. Okay. So this thing is riddled with problems that somehow, was just like transmission error. Imagine you want to talk about something repeatedly. So do you remember 9/11?
I do, kind of.
What do you remember about 9/11?
I remember being in my house, my mom, the TV
What's your mom's
screen.
name?
My mom's name's Heidi.
What house was it?
It was 100th Street in Byron Center, Michigan.
Okay. And where's that?
It's in Michigan.
What else?
Oh, I'm trying to think. My brother was there.
Yeah. What's his name?
His name is Noah.
What time of day?
It was in the morning.
Yeah. Was it cold?
It was not too cold. It was sunny.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see how many? Now think about this.
I was 5 years old.
How many times have you told that story?
I don't know.
A dozen?
Yeah, maybe a dozen.
A dozen. Now think about this. Imagine on that day, it wasn't 9/11, but someone you had personally loved and followed for 3 years was murdered in front of you. Imagine that, right? And then now imagine this. Imagine you had all these things in your mind. And then you saw him rise from the dead. And now imagine he tells you to go tell everybody, remember everything I taught you. And then you've spent the last 20 years, every day of your life, recounting that story. Think about that. Do you think that's whisper down the lane? That's not whisper down the lane. That's remembering, memorized, impressionable. Like I remember 9/11. I remember getting in at 8:46 into my car, Nissan Sentra, 1987 Nissan Sentra. Got into the car, turned on 7:90 a.m. WAEB in Allentown. I lived in Bethlehem. I was on Dewberry Avenue, 111 Dewberry Avenue. I drove 1 mile to church on Makeda Avenue, right next to Bethlehem Catholic. It was Calvary Baptist Church. I walked into my office. I'd heard on the way over that a Cessna had run into the World Trade Center. And I was like, it's crazy. I go and I sit down and I start doing some work. I knew I had a staff meeting on that day. And the secretary came in and said, a plane just ran into the World Trade Center. And I was like, oh yeah, a Cessna. She goes, no, I think it's a big one. And I was like, really? She's like, I'm going to go find out. She leaves. Oh, by the way, staff meeting's canceled. All I could think of was like, yes, I could get work done. So I was like, they can go listen to the news. And I started working. I didn't even pay attention to it. I was so excited about getting my work done. Pastor Bird comes in later. Pastor Larry Bird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He comes in and he goes, John, you need to come down. In the youth room, we had a TV set up. I was like, what? And he's like, this is a national emergency. And in my head, I'm like, this is too overblown. There's no way this happened, you know? So I put down my stuff. I come down. As soon as I came down to that room and we're watching, I watched someone interviewing somebody on top of one of the buildings, and the other building fell down as live as that was being carried. So I remember all those details. Yeah. I've only shared that maybe 30 times in my life, partly because of this type of exercise.
Right.
Imagine I had shared that story every day of my life since that time, 25 years ago.
So do
you see the reality of it?
You're illustrating the fact that, one, how vividly we can picture really impressionable moments in our life.
Yeah. It's a beautiful
someone
day.
like Jesus, especially, the teacher he was, and rising from the dead.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the Bible, if I remember in the verse right, there's a verse that Jesus says that he's sending his helper, the Holy Spirit, to help them remember what he has taught. And so on a human level, we have memory, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also a spiritual element to this, that if he rose from the dead, it's not that far-fetched to say, well, he also has a Holy Spirit that comes down and helps us pass these things on and remember, giving us the words that we need. And so it really ultimately wasn't actually just humans' memory, though that's still powerful.
Right.
It was additional help.
Well, and also a couple things too is we think 2,000 years ago, that's so long ago. It is 67 generations ago. That's one generation talking to the next, 67 links. You're the 67th link. That doesn't seem that much. And all it is, hey, this happened. That's all we're getting. We're not getting some produced thing. It's this happened to a bunch of people. They told a bunch of people. They told who told you. And you tell others. And then there's going to be a 68th generation. And that's all it is. There's no magic in it.
And John, I think too, thinking like 21st century, because we hear that the Old Testament particularly, there was oral history involved in the passing down of it. Like one person shared to another person. And it wasn't necessarily eyewitnesses for a lot of the Old Testament stuff.
Right.
And I hear that as a 21st century person, I think I can't trust oral history.
Yeah.
But if you look at cultures around the world who rely on oral history, they don't think about it the way that we do.
Yeah, because we're idiots.
Yeah, we're like, well, if it wasn't written down, you can't trust it.
Yeah.
But that's not how most cultures have been throughout history,
Not
even
at
in the
all.
world today. That's not
tell us why that is. Like, why is oral history more trustworthy than we think?
I think it's the respect that they have for that type of medium. Like, we assume that if someone spoke it, it's less credible than someone writing it, and it might actually be reversed back then. Not to mention it was harder to write stuff down,
right?
Yeah,
and less easy. But also, like, I think we just don't. What do they call that? Chronological snobbery.
Yeah,
where like we assume
presentism.
Because they're older, that they're like less reliable, or you can't trust them. That's kind of prejudiced on our.
Have you ever been in the Middle East and talked to somebody who can quote the Quran?
I never have.
Oh my gosh, they memorize the Quran and the New Testament and the Old Testament, and I mean, like they can pull stuff from. You can be like Leviticus chapter 18. They'll be like, thus saith the Lord, thou shalt, I mean, like they just do it.
Wow.
And what's crazy in these cultures, in say these cultures, we're the outlier.
Right.
Like we are the ones that are outlier who don't put in the effort to remember things. And the funny thing is we have this kind of presentist attitude of like, oh, well, they're just so primitive, and they can't even tell the difference between mythology and holding on to details. They would laugh at us. They're like, what are you talking about? They have king lists that go back in perpetuity. They can remember Othniel to Abdullah and like all these people straight back. And they knew the difference between a king list, which they held and guarded, and mythology. And they knew that the mythology was a symbol or a metaphor. It's a story. It's an etiological story of why we have rain. But when they were talking about certain kings that you go back, they memorized to like 300, 400 names back.
I feel like it's significant also what you said, Adam, about the respect they had for oral tradition. And just because we can't remember what we had for lunch yesterday doesn't mean that they didn't put a lot of different kind of effort. That was like a big, I think you said that, John, like the effort that went into remembering things and practicing that skill set.
Yeah.
Whereas I keep notes on my phone. I call it my second brain.
Yeah.
And so there's not really often an effort from me to like lock everything in my brain the same way back then. They would not have had other options, because if not everyone's writing or has a little like pen and pad on them, they talked in even just community to remember stuff. So it wasn't even just one person had to remember, it was people.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's a great story not too long ago where this guy, he was in the Middle East and he was having some tough time trying to reach Arabs in the Middle East for Christ, which is, hard to do. And so this guy became a Christian, and because he became a Christian, his community were voting on whether to honor kill him. And so he became a Christian. He wanted to be discipled. He was learning as much as he could. And over several months, he memorized the New Testament, like memorized it over the span of a few months. The community voted ultimately not to honor kill him, but to send him back to Saudi Arabia and get reprogrammed. And so he left the next morning, and this missionary was like, how cool that God would save this one person. He would come to Jesus. He would put the entire New Testament in his head and send him back into the heart of Islam.
Wow.
How cool is that? I mean, that's the stuff that's happening today.
Yeah.
So we know that's happening today. They can memorize 4 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of material. So that's New Testament, right? Old Testament is another, it's a whole different level of memorization, because it's not just oral, it's also scriptural. So they had rules, and I can't remember all the rules right now, but basically it's like when a person was copying a book of the Bible from the Old Testament, when they copied one to the other, they had to count the certain letters, the symbols across for the number. It had to equal a certain number of numbers or letters, certain number of letters down. They had to, on every page, go to the direct center. That character had to be the same exact center character on the next one. So they knew. And if nothing lined up, they burned it. They got rid of it.
Wow.
And so it took a long time to copy books. So Dead Sea Scrolls, you know much about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I know a bit. I remember going when I was in Israel, we were touring around and we went to the caves where they discovered them.
That's
It
cool.
was a
That's cool.
total coincidence. Like, as far as I understand, up until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, whenever it was, 1900s, I don't remember.
1948.
48. There was lots of skeptics, and probably the predominant thought was that you couldn't trust the Old Testament because we didn't have manuscript evidence that went back that far.
Yeah.
It was like, even after the New Testament manuscripts we had, we couldn't find Old Testament ones. But then all of a sudden, this guy's taking care of his sheep. A rock goes up in there or something. He stumbles upon these like jars that are hidden in this cave way back.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they realize there's stuff inside of the jars. There's manuscripts of ancient books, and they look at them and they're very old.
Yeah.
Remind me of how old they are. I know they're BC.
Yeah, 150 BC.
Crazy.
Yeah. The oldest manuscript we had at the time was the Masoretic text, which was about 1100 AD.
Wow. So that's a 1,200 year jump.
Again, we're talking like 100 years ago, people were making fun of the fact that, Hittites, parasites, they made up all that stuff. It's just, and of course we find all that stuff. And they were joking about the Old Testament. Like the oldest Old Testament we have is from 1100 AD. Moses wrote in 1500 BC, if you accept that. So there's like a 2,600 year difference there. There's no way that it's kept the same. So again, if you're starting out with a starting point of 1100 AD in terms of our oldest Old Testament manuscript, then we find these, 1948, I think it was 1947, bunch of kids throw a rock in there. They find it. They start leafing through. And some of this stuff, when they're opening it up, it's just flaking.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like falling into pieces. So they're trying to put it together. 1950 comes and goes, and we don't hear anything from them. 1960 comes and goes. We don't hear anything from the committee that's working on it. 1970, they still hadn't released results, which is kind of getting weird a little bit here. You know, I mean, it's a lot of work, but they didn't release anything. Giza Vermesh was the guy who led the whole team. He's an Egyptologist. He's not a Christian. They finally publish it in the 1980s under threat of lawsuit. Like, hey, you guys have got to release this. And they release it, and they show that the book of Isaiah, as one example, had not changed at all. And Vermesh was like, this, we've never seen anything like this. Like, nothing short of miraculous. And again, not a believer, not a Christian, but to show between 1100 AD and 150 BC, over 1,000 years time, nothing had changed. They shared that, Wesley Huff shared that on Joe Rogan not too long ago. And it was a couple episodes later where Joe Rogan's like, I still can't get over that. Like 1,000 years, nothing had changed.
Yeah. And that, to me, that speaks to like God intervening. You know, like, yes, they were they were respecting it and they were doing a good job transcribing it. But like, that sounds miraculous to me. Like, God intended for this piece of literature to be preserved over time.
Yeah.
It means there's something special about the Word of God, the Bible.
Well, for me, it's like, I'll see these YouTubers or just people that are conspiracy theorists who just throw around facts about snowballing or whisper down the lane. And it's like, I wouldn't get that annoyed at it if it weren't so opposite of what the truth is.
Right.
You know, it would be something to be like, well, you got a point, you know, well, yeah, we're not really sure. But the fact that they're poking at this on such a very thin level when there is depth to the Old and New Testaments that show exactly what you're saying. God has gone to great lengths to deliver this to us. And what I love about God, it seems like, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like God doesn't care about whether people sneer at it. It's not like he's going to put out fires on like, no, it's true. No, it's true. He's just like, dude,
let it speak for itself.
It is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've done my work. It's up to you. You know, if you don't believe it, you believe it.
And it's remarkable too, because one of the biggest arguments is that man wrote this, right? But then that becomes one of the most remarkable elements of how in the world did man's involvement preserve like that?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like God's smiling at us that way too, and saying it actually makes it even that much more of a joy to discover it, because man's involvement, like you just assume man are going to screw it up.
Yeah.
But God actually ended up using men to preserve it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And again, we live in a time where we question everything. And we got to understand we live in that context. Again, we joked about like Nixon. But I mean, it's a great symbol of like Watergate and all that kind of stuff. It's just a great symbol of our time. We question everything. We're suspicious of everything. People weren't always like that. You know, and so not that we shouldn't be or should be or, you know, regardless of that. But what I say to people is this. They're like, well, you know, what, man wrote this down? We're supposed to trust that? And I always ask them this. I'm like, so what would you do? I'm like, what do you mean? You're God. You want to get a message out? How would you do it? So funny how quickly it's just like, So, I mean, I asked you guys, what would you do? How would you do it differently?
I feel like it's
Put on video?
You would almost imagine, you'd almost imagine
Make a YouTube channel?
The only other way that it would be, I don't know, we'll say more compelling, is if it was some kind of very obviously supernatural thing that was
Like what?
zapped somewhere.
Like what?
And zapped a printer in the Bible times, where it's like, we didn't invent this yet. This is clearly from God.
Yeah.
I have to make up sci-fi.
Play that out.
I have to make all this up on the spot, but it's like sci-fi level stuff. Like, in order for it to be different than man's involvement, there has to be some element of like supernatural.
Dude, there would be hundreds of YouTube channels today as to how ridiculous. Why would anybody believe that a printer just popped out of nowhere?
Yeah.
You really believe that? So, Adam, how would you do it?
So this actually is a doubt that I've had personally for a long time, and I wrestled with it, and I have some answers, but I think other people might feel the same way. If I were God, I think it might be easier to just show up every generation physically and be like, what's up? I'm God. Do some miracles like he did in the first century, and then like go back up to heaven and be like, all right, follow me, believe me, here's my book. But he doesn't do that. And so it's almost like he's hidden from us. And I know there's like an element of faith in there, but that seems easier than the Bible. And so that this feels like there's introducing some extra doubts for people, roadblocks, things they have to jump over. So I've always wondered about that, and I wonder how you guys would respond.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea. We're going to come up with all kinds of cool ideas. We're going to come up with, like, we're going to put video, we're going to write things on the sky, every day at noon, God's going to be like, I'm here, or whatever, which would be cool. I think that what we do is we underestimate the power of doubt, and we underestimate the human condition of falling back to stasis. That for a while we'd be like, oh my gosh, look, this is so great. And we'd have, like, again, YouTube channels, we'd have industries, we'd sell souvenirs, we'd be all excited about it. And then we would drift back to stasis. It wouldn't be long before we had a world war. There would just be, and then Jesus would come back, oh, okay. And so I don't know. And I don't want to poo your idea, because I think that would be kind of cool. It might be a little bit easier. But ultimately, we just come back to the same place we are. We've got a book here that is miraculous. They've recorded a person dying and rising again. Like, that's pretty amazing. And yet we have this whole industry of people saying, look how wrong it is. So regardless of what we've done or what we would do or what God would do to try to reach us, I think we would fall back to that same low point again. Just like, well, I wish he'd do something else. Yeah. I think God thinks we're fickle.
Yeah. And I think there's power in the reality that God loves to use people. Like, that's consistent with the Bible, consistent with how he's interacted with humans. He loves to empower us, and he uses us to accomplish incredible things. And so for him to always step down, it's almost like he loves to build up other leaders, empower other people. And if he's always dropping in.
Well, isn't that the idea of inspiration? I mean, if the idea of inspiration is for God to not just dictate, but to actually work through us.
We actually didn't hit much on that.
Yeah.
You want to hit on some inspiration stuff, Adam? Like, how does that work in the Bible?
Yeah, so like growing up, I kind of thought that the Bible was a golden tablet, sort of like Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Like he literally got
Gomorrah.
golden tablet. Or even the Quran, like the gift of Allah wasn't Muhammad. It was the Quran.
Yeah.
And so if you learn Arabic, you can see exactly what God said.
Yeah.
But that's not what Christianity says, right? Like Christianity, the gift is Jesus, not the Bible necessarily. But the Bible includes Jesus.
And people get that mixed up sometimes.
I think so. I think so. But that's also a snag for me now, and I think it has been for many people. Like, if the Bible is not a golden tablet, then how can we trust it? I know 2 Timothy talks about how the Bible is God-breathed. All scripture is God-breathed. Says that the prophets were carried along in the Holy Spirit as they wrote. But I'm like, what does that even mean? If it's not a golden tablet, if they didn't go into a trance and like wrote it out, then like, how do we know that it, like, does inspired mean like the same as if, John, you're preaching a really good message on Sunday morning? Is that inspired? You know what I mean? So I'm just wondering, are there levels to this? That, I think, is the question that I come to when it comes to inspiration.
Yeah. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is kind of what you're saying, is that God has decided to include us for one reason or another in the transmission of his gospel. And we've seen evidences along the way that there's some miraculous stuff that has gone on in terms of the transmission of it. Unlike any other document, it is unique among any other document that we can look at. And we've talked, about that, and we'll be talking about that in future episodes. So,
yeah. So one kind of last question I wanted to hit on too is, we talked about how the Bible came to be, how miraculous it is that it's even a thing.
Yeah.
And so now that
and it's weird too.
It's wild how much has happened for it to be what it is.
Proliferated.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, I guess we got something.
Yeah. Yeah. The first viral message right there.
And not satisfying to a lot of people. Because like you said, we wanted something that like dropped down out of heaven. Yeah. But it's the way it was done,
Yeah. And so I'm wondering then, now that we have it, if you're looking at what's between the covers, are there contradictions? And so, because we obviously were trying, it sounds like we were trying to avoid contradictions, putting it together, like the book of Thomas, Barnabas, because we saw that, we're like, that's not right. And so now that we have what we have, are there still contradictions in the Bible now?
Yeah, and there's a lot. Are you familiar? You've probably seen.
I've read some stuff. I've seen lots of TikToks claiming that there are. And so I don't know, I necessarily know how to refute all of these things, but I hear about, specifically related to the Gospels, I'll hear stuff about like, well, Jesus was, Bethlehem, Nazareth. What's this census? The census doesn't exist, and stuff like that. I hear often. I hear a lot about the Old Testament with the numbers of like, well, there was like 2 million leaving Egypt. That's impossible. and that's a contradiction from the numbers that we see in another passage of scripture.
Right.
Stuff like that. I don't know if we want to dig into like individual ones. I have to look stuff up.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I do hear this, that there's contradictions
Mhm.
in the Bible.
Yeah.
And because there's a contradiction, you can't trust it.
Yeah, and it's sometimes when people ask me that about contradictions, I say, "Yeah, which one?" And I'll ask
Right.
them to look it up, and
Mhm.
most people don't have any clue. They just heard about it or thought they heard someone who heard about it or whatever. So I think they fall into two classes. One would be like the 2 million people were coming out of Egypt or whatever. In terms of number, we know in the ancient Near East, numbers were not exactly like, okay, there's a scientific, this is the number of people, like when it talks about slaying people in battle. They give inflated or hyperbolic type numbers, and so there's that one class where they're making a statement. So, for example, when Zacchaeus he meets Jesus, has him to his house, and he changes, he transforms. He's like, "Oh, from now on, I'm going to pay back everybody 4 times the amount of whatever they paid me." Everybody sitting in that crowd knew he didn't mean that literally. It's impossible to pay back everybody 4 times that you've cheated them out. So it's basically his statement of like, I have thoroughly changed and I will try to help you out as much as I can. Nobody lined up expecting 4 times the amount. And so in the ancient Near East, there is this kind of sense of, okay, you're making a statement with your numbers. So I would say there's a class of discrepancies, in the Bible that fall into that category. And then there are others that have to do with perspective. So for example, in one gospel, it talks about how Jesus went, or how Judas, in one gospel, it talks about how Judas went out to hang himself. And in another gospel, it talks about how he fell on some rocks and his insides burst out. And when you look into that, actually what that's describing is like if somebody hangs themselves and they die, all of the fluid kind of goes down to their belly. And it's kind of gruesome. Over time, either the thing snaps or, they kind of fall out of it. And that's like a description of his insides being burst out over a bunch of rocks.
So it's like 2 ways to describe the same event.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of those discrepancies I would kind of give to that,
And probably too, because stuff like that, I feel like that's a lot of the New Testament contradictions is like between the Gospels, you have different, I'm trying to think, when they discover Jesus' empty tomb, I believe there's a discrepancy between like who shows up first.
Yeah.
And I hear that often, but it's like, well, maybe they just didn't include that someone else had been there before them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that actually, to me, lends more credibility to the Gospels.
Yeah.
Because if I'm hearing a story of something that happened today from both of you, you're probably not going to both tell me the exact same story.
From your vantage point. Right?
Exactly. It's from your vantage point. And if it is the same story, then something fishy's going on because I'm
You
like,
have to
they talked to
corroborate
each
it.
other before this to make sure they had their stories straight.
Yep.
So to me, it's like, it makes sense. And it actually is helpful that there's some like differences in the way that it's shared.
It's authentic. Yeah. It presents it as authentic. And then, it's funny because for every person that tells me, well, there's discrepancies between this and this and this, you got to kind of line them up on what actually lines up between the different gospels.
Someone's wondering, how am I supposed to know if the Bible's just trying to tell me an actual number of something that happened versus some kind of symbolism? Because some numbers in the Bible mean things, right? Like numbers of completion, or like, what is it, 144,000 is like a number of completion. How are we supposed to know that when it pops up versus, no, that's actually trying to give me a number? And should we care about that?
Well, I think you got to know what's the genre of the writing. Like if you're talking Revelation, 44,000 people will be saved. We believe that's apocalyptic literature and not necessarily literal. If you're Jehovah's Witness, then it's literal. Only 44,000 people will go to heaven. But
144. Right?
Sorry, 144,000. Is that right? I don't even remember.
Because it's 12 times 12.
Oh
right?
yeah, 12 times 12, 144. So I think you got to know the genre that you're looking at. When 1 Corinthians 15 says there were 500 witnesses, that means there were 500 people. That's not a metaphor for anything else. So I think that matters a lot. And I think that's where a lot of like Book of Daniel, there's tons of numbers in there. Genesis 1, 2, 3, all the way to chapter 10. There's a lot. That's like poetic or metaphorical versus some other places in the New Testament particularly is not.
And it's not clean. You know what I mean? Like when someone says, man, he hit that ball a mile long, it's like, it wasn't 5,280 feet, or man, I was there for days. I was standing in line at the DMV for days. No, you weren't.
Yeah.
So it's messy. Yeah, it's going to be, but I would say this, there are no questions about Jesus, in the central the central doctrines of him dying and rising again aren't based on numbers or aren't based on whether or not we can understand what type of literature is this. Yeah, there are going to be some things in the book of Revelation. There are going to be some things in Daniel, that like, okay, so what do these numbers mean? And maybe there are some things that God's kind of throwing out there that are secret or interesting or whatever, but I don't know if we can build whole theologies off of it.
Yeah.
We still got to go back to the resurrection. And so that's kind of where I would say, I don't think it's clean.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But I do think for everything that people talk about with regard to discrepancies between the texts, there are so many things that line up between the texts. Like Luke will talk about Philip, the disciple, being from Bethsaida. And then in John, Jesus goes over to Philip and he's like, hey, we should buy them some bread. What do you think? And it's like, well, why did he talk to Philip there? And then you find out that Philip was from Bethsaida and they were in Bethsaida at the time. Those two things go together.
That's cool.
At one point, Jesus tells everybody to sit down. He's feeding the 5,000. He's like, sit down on the grass. And I think it's Mark that includes the green grass. And then you find out later in John that it was the time of Passover. And during the time of Passover, that's only when the grass was green, because it was the rainy season beforehand. And if you've been to Israel, you know that green grass is
rare,
not common.
Yeah.
So it's funny that like how they tend to line up with each other. In Matthew, it talks about how Herod was talking with his servants and how something he had shared with his servants was being, dribbled out. And then you find out in Luke that one of Jesus, who was it? One of Jesus' followers was Joanna, whose husband was Chuza, who was one of the servants of Herod. So those things line up between Matthew and Luke. It's like, well, how did they get that information knowing in Matthew? Well, it's because in Luke, one of the people following Jesus would have been talking about the information that was shared by Herod through her husband, Chuza. So there's a bunch of things there that show how all these things line up. Now think about this for a minute. The internal consistency of these books, these weren't like these guys got in the same room together and were like, okay, so you're going to share this? Yeah, and I'm going to share this. And hey, you're going to, okay. No, they were in different areas. And not only were they in different areas, but everybody that copied what they were saying was from all over the world.
Right.
Like literally all over the world. If at any point we would have documented evidence that this was manipulated or changed, that would make front page news. The Bible is completely wrong. Look, over here we found in this area, whatever. And you got to believe it. There's no one powerful enough to keep that under wraps, because that would be millions of dollars in their pocket to show that the Bible is full of errors. So
it sounds like these are all just like casual details that people are adding in without thinking about it because they were there.
Yeah.
In the same way that you can recall where you were at 9/11 and just kind of casually drop details that only you would know because you were there.
Yeah, I was watching a movie recently where, no, I know what it was. It was Die Hard. It was.
But you were watching that recently?
I was watching Die Hard 2.
Okay.
Was it Die Hard with a Vengeance?
You're going to
I've
hate
never
me.
seen
I have
the
not
second one.
seen Die Hard.
You've never seen
I've
Die
never
Hard?
seen Die Hard. I've heard it's the best Christmas movie, but I haven't watched it.
Die Hard's a great movie. It's horrible language, but it's a great movie. Anyhow, one of the terrorists is faking that they're just like a hotel worker. And is it John? What's his name? John?
I don't know his name in the movie.
The main
Bruce
character?
Willis, right?
Bruce Willis. Okay, so Bruce Willis' character, he's walking through the hotel lobby. This terrorist comes up behind him, and the terrorist is supposed to have like an Austrian accent, but he changes it into an American accent. He's like, well, I'm just sitting here waiting for whatever. And he's walking through the lobby. And as he's walking through the lobby, he says, yeah, well, I had to get on the lift and head up to my flat. And it's like a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Like, who calls it a
elevator?
lift? Who calls it a flat?
Yeah.
And you see John just kind of look at him from the side of his eye. And I'm like, oh, this is good. So those types of things would have tipped off anybody. And this is what I'm saying. If you looked at the Gospels and saw that they were trying to overlap with each other or like run in concert with each other, you would see those evidences. Or if you saw that it was really written in 400, 500, 600 AD, like some people say, you would see anachronisms. You would see people talk about things or mention things that just don't, that's not the way you talked about them. So like in John, the book of John, when it talks about having the wedding in Cana of Galilee, that's a very, very specific village. that like by 400, 500, 600, it was like you're not going to Google for that information. Like you're not getting those details from there. So when you mention details, that's a huge part of the gospel.
Yeah, that's huge. So we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I mean, we've given so much credence to how the Bible came to be, kind of debunking myths, that there's so much that pops up that seems like, oh, they have new knowledge, but it's not. It's often just flat out wrong. So there's so much to say.
And we mentioned Die Hard,
and we
so
mentioned Die Hard. We threw that in.
and Star Wars.
So we're putting all this together, and so what we're trying to do here is say it's a miracle that we have this book. I mean, it is. There's so much evidence to say it's amazing. Only God's hand being part of this could have made this happen, and He used people. And that's actually not the biggest knock on it. That's one of the biggest piece of evidence that God worked through that. His hand was part of it. And so I kind of want to land on
real quick. Could I just
go
throw
ahead.
this in here? It comes down to this free will thing, that God purposely gives us the opportunity to respond in faith. And, if I had to mention another thing, it would be like, why does God want us to have faith more than anything? But I think it's so wrapped up with that idea of free will, that God gives us the opportunity to choose in faith. And if He had come over the top, like you're saying, every day at noon, God shows up in the sky, be like, I'm still here. Like you have no choice.
Right.
And I wish I didn't have the choice. Honestly, I wish it was just kind of like, well, can't deny it, But I wonder how I would live my life then. Would I be? There's always this expectation of like, if God only did this, then I would be this. And I wonder if I would live in that environment where God showed up at noon every day in the sky and said, I'm still here. Would I eventually settle back to exactly where I am right now?
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
You know what I mean? I think I would. And so I think God knows that. And so He makes the gate higher, and He presents silence sometimes. And He presents doubt of like, well, it could be or couldn't be. It's your choice.
Yeah.
And that is frustrating, but wise.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, cold hard evidence we're trying to pull out on this stuff, but it also shows, love doesn't exist apart from choice.
Yeah.
And like God shows His love for us by allowing us to choose Him. And really, I just want to make this personal, right? Because we're talking so much about the Bible, but at the end of the day, it's not, the grand scheme of things isn't about, oh, how cool we put this book together. That's supplemental. That's awesome. But the whole point is what the Bible is actually teaching and showing about Jesus and how to live life and how to have the life that God has designed for us. And so I'm just curious, real briefly, for you guys to share, how is this personal to you? Like how should people think about the Bible outside of the evidence, right? But when they interact with it, how should people really be reading it? What should they be getting out of it?
I think in so many ways, the Bible has changed my life in the lives of so many of my friends and people that I know. And I think the reason is the Bible is the way that you hear from God. Like it's really the main way that I hear from God. And I think that like when I'm consistent spending time reading scripture, not just for information, but to like commune with God, have a relationship with God, I've seen my life change in a beautiful way. Like I've seen myself present the fruits of the Spirit. I'm more loving when I spend time reading God's word. I'm more filled with peace and less anxious when I spend time just listening to what God has said to other people and they've shared with me. It changed my life. And I also will say the Bible Project talks about consistently how the Bible is a unified story that leads to Jesus. And that's helped me so much to understand the Bible because it's almost like a mountain, like there's a pinnacle. That's where Jesus' story comes in. It's the Gospels. And then on both sides, you're either leading up to Jesus' arrival or descending from that moment, knowing He'll come again in the future. And if I can think about the Bible like that, then all of a sudden I start seeing Jesus everywhere. And in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in the prophecies, in the epistles, it's like Jesus is the point. And so when I get lost in the sauce of some crazy Old Testament stories, it's usually because I forgot that Jesus is the point. And so anytime I can continue to remind myself of Jesus' importance, it really, let's say hypothetically, there were contradictions that showed up and someone was able to disprove some story from the Old Testament, that wouldn't shake my faith because my faith is in Jesus, not the Bible. I trust the Bible because I trust Jesus, not the other way around. It's not that I trust Jesus because of the Bible.
It's good.
And that's changed.
Wow.
For me, it's like I was born in a family of people that argue and are pushy and stubborn and loud. about 45 minutes after every meal, we would argue about something, and it was just like constant. And I love my upbringing. I had like the best childhood, loved it all, but I had a lot of rough edges. I was pushy. I was insistent on my own way. I kind of did my own thing, whatever. When I first read, I checked out the New Testament from the school library in not King James, and I just read the book of Matthew, and it was like reading Rocky. You know what I mean? Of him going up against the religious leaders, of how he stood up for right, how he healed the sick, like all of those things were just like lost in it. I wanted to be like him. I remember just walking around thinking like, why would Jesus do this? I gave my life to Jesus shortly afterward. And as a result of reading the Bible and becoming like Jesus, I had a lot of stuff I needed to change. I remember a guy sitting down with me in college and being like, John, there's a lot of things you need to work on. And I was like, okay. And he's like, here's a few of them. And it had to do with being pushy. It had to do with being arrogant. It had to do with being like thinking my way was the best way and not listening to other people. He's like, I just want you to trust me, because when two people look at your life, you and someone else, and that person really cares about you, trust the other person because you can't see it. And that's all New Testament thought. Right. That's all Bible. So the Bible has profoundly changed me. And it's not just through the reading of the stories. I got lost in the stories, and the stories made me go like, I want to be like Jesus. And then it was meeting other people that loved me enough to challenge me to change, to be more like Jesus. And, I got a lot more to go, but I can see definitely where I like listening to other people now. I like saying I'm wrong. I like saying I don't know. Like my kids will ask me like, hey, what about this? Like, I don't know. There was a time in my life where saying I don't know, like I flinched. I was like, I need to know.
Yeah.
If I don't know, then I'm weak. I've changed. And I'm excited about that. And it's like, how's God going to change me in the next 30, 40 years? Like what's God going to do with that through reading the Bible? And so I think it's the Bible, but I also think it's the community of believers that arise from listening and depending on the Bible that changes us.
Wow. So good. Seems like we could live our lives just in search of evidence, in search of proof, and miss out on the life-changing capabilities of
you
the book itself.
You got to put a bookend to it. Like search your proof out, and like I'm a big believer in talking about proof, but it only goes so far. You're not going to change because of the proof. Like the proof that you see now, okay, now I'm going to be a different person. That's not true. The grass is not always greener. There's a point where you're just going to have to be like, I choose to believe regardless of what I think.
And there's probably a difference between knowing the Bible and letting the Bible know you. So people.
That was awesome.
You got both of us at the same time.
Yeah.
People who know the Bible so well, they have information about the Bible, might have never been changed by the Bible because they never allowed it to change them.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to be that person.
Yeah. So some of the evidence of the Bible is in people, which is so cool. It's the evidence that it works. So, hey, was it cool how it came to be? Yeah, but it's also really cool. It's literally changing people's lives all over the world. That alone is evidence of, hey, this book is working. It's changing lives. And so while we want you to have evidence, we want you to have stuff you can hold on to. As John said, it goes so far to a point where you have to decide now, what am I going to do with it? Like, I've set the stage. Am I going to get into it? Am I going to learn from it? Am I going to let God actually begin to change my heart? And that's not easy to do, because we have to take off our critical glasses at some point and just lean in relationally to who God is, who Jesus is. And that's a big problem that we can also face is, okay, if we believe all of this about the Bible, do we believe Jesus? Do we believe he is who he says he was? Do we believe he actually walked the earth? We've set the groundwork for the Bible, but haven't yet set the groundwork for Jesus. And so in the next episode, that's what we're getting into are we 100% sure that Jesus was real and that he was God? So tune into the next episode to find out.
There are people outside of the Bible who recognize that there was a guy named Jesus who died on the cross, and people claim to have seen him rose from the dead.
I know there's a lot of prophecies in the Old Testament that Jesus supposedly fulfilled.
Yeah.
What's the probability of Jesus stumbling into some of these things? The chances of this happening is a 1 followed by 17 zeros. I wrote it down, a 100 quadrillion.
If the question is, how do we know outside the Bible that Jesus was really who he was? Okay. It's almost like we got to understand the seismic shift that happened within culture and within the world. So was he real? You can't escape the effect of Jesus in our culture.